Welcome to the second session this afternoon entitled Games, Apps, Social Networks and New Devices, Production Future with Non-Linear Money. A bit of a mouthful, but hopefully we'll start to clarify elements of that and talk to the experts joining me here on the panel this afternoon. Maurice Wheeler, who's Planning Director of Digital Outlook Communication in the UK and LA. Graham Harvey on the far side, who is CEO of Huzhu Tech. And Julien Borde, just leaning forward so I can read your title, Head of Children and Youth Programs from French Televisions in France. I'm going to start with a quick presentation which just shows 10 points talking about the current landscape or framework as it stands today, and then we'll hear from each of our panel members independently, and then I'll hopefully challenge and test them with some questions, and then we'll take questions from the audience. And if you could tweet those questions in, that's fantastic. Then it'll be shared with everyone who can't join us here today online and obviously enter into the spirit of what we're going to discuss. Just take my place at the podium. Just a quick one slide about myself. There's Dominic Mason. I'm director at Hazem.com. We're a strategic digital partner. Companies such as BBC, Nintendo, Nokia, as well as small to medium-sized enterprises and individuals and angel investors. Let me just test this. Okay. We analyze and then take action. We don't just follow trends, and that's how we work with a lot of our partners and clients. So people tend to come to us for advice when they're paralyzed by choice, which is a topic we'll enter into later on. So I'm going to quickly whiz through 10 fast-moving trends affecting all of our audiences here at MIP Junior, and following on from the excellent previous session. So you will see some repeated themes, but I think it's because they're important and not because I'm just aping some of the previous speakers. So I'll whiz through these, and like I said, then we'll have a short specific presentation from each of the panel members. Okay, trend number one. You want people to register. Of course you do. You want to capture their data. You want to know more about your audience. Will they register in a world where they can simply log in from a platform where they're already registered, where their friends are, where they share day in, day out? So giving the audience enough to force them to register and give you private data is becoming more and more of a challenge, and something you should think carefully about. As we heard in the previous session, especially tweens, but also younger children and older audiences like to take your content, mash it with their own content, mesh it into places where they exist. A very, very simple example is rich media commenting in Facebook. I share a video or photo, you comment on it with a video, somebody else comments on it with a sound clip, and so on and so forth. The next one is that Flash is not dead, despite reports of its imminent demise. Flash is very much alive on the web. PC sales are growing. Flash on tablet devices is either non-existent or on an Android device a terrible experience. We can talk about that in detail afterwards if you wish to have another debate. Everything is mobile. Absolutely everything is mobile and should be and will be. It's one of the trends that's swept in from Japan, Asia, Korea, and other areas where they've almost skipped the desktop PC experience, gone directly to mobile. And the choice is whether to make something wonderfully creative and specific for mobile, as in that great tricked out car in the picture, or just to wedge your website into a mobile phone. Now, one of those will work, potentially be wonderful for you. The other one will be a dreadful experience and turn your partners and your audience right off. Tech is moving forever onwards. Latest trends are talking about HTML5 and adaptable content. But what do rich media providers use HTML5 for? Flash gave us wonderful, low bandwidth, very professional animation tool. What's the equivalent in HTML5 and CSS3? I know this isn't a technical session, so I won't go into that in detail, but have that on your horizon. Social networks are platforms, and not so much dumb platforms where you can just plaster content and people can see it. People can now comment, they can share, they can share their mashups against your content, and more importantly, they can earn money from it. YouTube is a social network. People can assemble your content into their channels and earn money from it. Google AdWords has now been announced against video, and YouTube has its own advertising elements in there. You can pay for content on Facebook with Facebook credits, and so on. And before we become all North America-centric, there are other social networks available. There are very strong social networks in Poland, Russia, Brazil, Indonesia, etc., etc. Apps are everywhere, is our next trend. And some of them are treasures that you should bother digging out and you should use. Others are just clones, copies, stealing other people's functionality, and unfortunately make it harder and harder for users to find your very high quality apps. So users are obfuscated from finding the gold by layers and layers of mud and dirt. So how do you make your content stand out in a world where there's apps on every platform and hundreds of thousands of apps on every topic on every platform? The next trend is looking at emergent economies. In the previous session, someone mentioned what about trends in other countries, what about trends in other cultures? It's very interesting to look at somewhere like Brazil or Indonesia or India and see what's happening there, how media is viewed, how media is traded, how media is commented upon. And anyone who thinks that SMS is dead is very, very much mistaken, when I think, not off the top of my head, but if you follow Tomi Ihannanen, I think his name is, someone else can tweet it and correct me, who's ex-Nokia on Twitter. I think it was 4.2 trillion SMS is sent, and 46% growth year on year. It's Tomi Ahonen. So follow him on Twitter if you want the latest on SMS trends and some very, very interesting figures from places like Indonesia. Everything is streaming all of the time. Cloud platforms are being pushed by all of the major players. They all have their own independent cloud offerings. And I say independent because Apple's cloud is actually based on top of Microsoft's cloud. Someone has to have a server somewhere and provide a professional software service at the end of the day. But now I think the idea of having things in the cloud that follow you around wherever you are, even if it's the latest Glee, is quite common, even if you don't understand the tech behind it. It's an ongoing trend. Finally, don't confuse new technology, new forms of technology, and new ways of viewing technology as the users having changed. My mom still prefers knitting. Now she's watching a knitting video on YouTube. We all love kittens, obviously. Now it's kittens. You know, you're following a kitten on Twitter. I can't remember the name of the cat on Twitter that's got more followers than President Obama, but you know, you can find that out for yourselves. So always, always, as ever, think of the users. And interestingly, from the previous session, when the guy, whose name I can't remember, from Fremantle, the question came in. Bob. Second name, Higgins, from Fremantle was talking. Somebody challenged him about decisions, editorial decisions made on YouTube, and users decided which characters are in, which characters are out. I'm not saying he bristled about it, but I think it's one of those things where users aren't the best editors. Users aren't producers. If it's a reality show, users voting who stays in and who goes out and who goes in the garden and has to dance up dressed as a chicken, that's fine. But editorial formats, it's very difficult to give users choice around who stays in and who goes out. And users actually don't want that level of choice. They can't understand the choices they've been given. I remember a movie once I went to the cinema and you had to press a button on a pad to decide if the character had a cigarette at some point or not. And I pressed the button. A, I didn't get my choice, which is massively disappointing. And B, I then judged the rest of the experience based on that. So I don't think users necessarily understand choice. So understand your users. And I think, yes, thank you very much. So, you know, go out there and make and share some lovely creations. what I'm going to do is hand over to Maurice Wheeler, without any further ado, and he will introduce you to his and his company's work.
Hello, my name's Maurice Wheeler, Planning Director at Digital Outlook. Let's wait for my slides to come up. So Digital Outlook, we are 13 years old today. And what we do is we really create experiences that engage with the audiences using our clients' IPs and our clients' brands. So a lot of these are the characters that we work with our clients. And what we do is we help bring them to life and help use them as a tool to engage with the audience. So whether that be through an iPhone app, whether that be through a Facebook app or a website or a flash game or an event or an interactive light presentation, whatever it may be, we use IP and use that to engage with our audience. I think like many people in this space, we decided that because we've become so great at doing it for our clients, that we think that we can do it for ourselves as well. So we created Digital Outlook Studios, which is our own IP studios. And what I want to specifically talk to you today about is one of the IPs that have come out of the studio. It's called Zoiks. Now, Zoiks is set within the world of technology, if you like. There's these little critters that run around machines. They're the things that mean that your printer breaks. They're the things that mean that your iPhone crashes. Your computer crashes. They're even being responsible for the blackouts in the southeastern board in 2003 and whatever it may be. So they exist within the world of computers and they kind of run around and cause mischief. So we came up with that concept probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. And it was one of the things that we were kind of incubating and working on. And one of the things that we know very well is we know the audience. We know kids very well. We do a lot of work with kids, as you probably saw from our earlier stuff. We're really kind of in that space. And we know that kids love playing games. We know that they spend about 3 hours a day playing games, whether that be on the console, whether that be on their mobile phone, whether that be online. They love playing games and they do a lot of games. We also know how to make games. As a studio, we've got a whole bunch of Flash programmers and designers who actually make games. This one in the middle is one of our games that we did for the Mr. Men franchise around pinball, won lots of awards around this. And also we know Miniclip very well, who are a very large global, I think Europe's biggest free online games portal. So very, very large portal. And what we did is we decided to do something a bit different with Zoiks, and that was instead of to try and launch it down using the more traditional channels, we actually decided that we were going to launch Zoiks as a game. And the first iteration of the IP was going to be as an online game. So, and this was 5, 6 years ago. So we weren't trying to do Angry Birds at the time because Angry Birds didn't exist, but kind of following that same model. So we partnered up with Miniclip and we used them. And from the word go, we said, well, let's work together. Let's use your fantastic reach and let's work together to create something interesting. So working with Miniclip, and working with them to understand what their platform is about, to understand what the audience is about, or to understand what game mechanics, we came up with a specific game, which is around a kind of tower defense game. And we took that concept and we took it to Zodiac Media Group. They were very excited. They found it very interesting. They thought that there was an interesting concept there around actually launching a game launching an IP through a game as the first iteration. So we worked very closely with them to begin to shape some of the story because, as I kind of mentioned before, we're not necessarily experts in creating IP, but we're probably experts in creating experiences around the IP. So we worked with Zodiac. We worked with a guy called Angus Fletcher, who's a great guy in children's media, and we helped begin to shape the narrative. We helped begin to shape the stories. We helped begin to shape the characters. So what started off as these little critters in a world started taking shape into something that was a bit more around there were some real life elements to it as well, and there was a bunch of kids who were trying to battle with these guys in this world. So again, we worked with Zodiac. So far we've working with Miniclip to get us a distribution. We're working with Zodiac to help us shape the story and to help shape the narrative. And then we went to Egmont and we worked with them as a book and a comic publishing partner. And what was great about working with those guys is we created this game, but it's very hard within a gaming environment to bring the story to life. So through Toxic, we helped, obviously we used Toxic as a great platform, which is a kids magazine, as a great platform to launch the game, but also we created some comic strips, which helped add a bit more flavor to the whole brand and the whole experience. So we used these guys to help tell our story a bit better. So far, we kind of partnered with many, many people to help bring the story to life. So far, the first game, which was this tower defense game, it's had 20 million gameplays, and this is actually a few months old. I forgot to grab the latest stats, but it's had 20 million gameplays of around 14 minutes each. So very, very large levels of engagement with the first game. The second game, slightly different mechanic, showed a side view of the Zoiks, which was something that we wanted to try and get across. It's had 25 million gameplays of 11 minutes each, so slightly less time, but obviously much more gameplays. So a really very interesting model, because actually if you add all that kind of brand engagement and brand exposure time, it's equivalent to over 1 million kids watching every single one of the 51 Octonauts episodes. And that's including the long penguin one at the end as well. So it's a very, very interesting model, because now we're talking about actually in kind of parallels to other kid TV properties, and we've got a really, really engaged and very, very exposed audience to the brand and to the IP. As well as the fantastic reach and the fantastic time and the fantastic brand engagement. And by the way, those numbers are just the numbers off Miniclip, which were the kind of exclusive partner for the first few weeks, and then we stuck it everywhere. I think it's on about 200 odd gaming sites, so that actually only includes one of the partners. We then started seeing a lot of user-generated content. As you can see down the left-hand side, people are creating their own, and we didn't create any of these. People are creating their own walkthroughs, telling you how the best way it is to lay out the level to complete it. We've had people creating Facebook pages. Not many people are liking them, but so far people are creating Facebook pages at least. People are writing cheats. People are writing game reviews of it. We've got some great feedback from the kind of game review world and from the forums within Miniclip. So really they're engaged with it and they're very excited by it. And finally, a quote from Nigel Pickard of Zodiac. I'll kind of let you read that rather than read it to you. So there's lots of very exciting things in the pipeline for Zoiks. Very exciting conversations around TV, very exciting conversations obviously with Egmont around books and around publishing. We're speaking to quite a few people at the moment around licensing and merchandising. So I can't stand up here today and say I'm a very rich man as a result of Zoiks, but I can definitely say that we've made some very good headway into the children's IP by approaching it in a slightly different way. 5 key learnings that I kind of want to leave with you. Partner, partner, partner. I mean, Zoiks is probably our 4th or 5th IP out of the studio. The first few we tried to do alone. We kind of understand how to launch things and how to get things viral, but it's a crapshoot. And straight away, as soon as we got Miniclip on board, we got a guaranteed channel of distribution. We could start talking about numbers like 20 million, 25 million gameplays, and that's when people like Zodiac really start getting excited. And talking of Zodiac, make sure you develop the narrative, the stories and the characters. It's interesting to see in Angry Birds, they kind of have these cutscenes which kind of bring some of the characters and some of the stories to life in a little way. So really do focus on that. Even if your first iteration is a game, there's no real opportunity to develop the characters or develop the story. The more you think about that in the first place, kids pick up if there's a backstory or not, what's going on. Also, a rubbish IP and a great game won't get you anywhere. So don't think that by creating the greatest game in the whole wide world, but having a rubbish IP behind it will do you any favors. And the same thing the other way around. There's no point in creating an incredible IP, but the game is rubbish because you won't get the referrals, you won't get the repeat gameplays. And then finally, aggressively monetize as soon as possible. I mean, we're very fortunate that we kind of managed to get partners on board quite quickly, but if we were to do it again, we'd definitely look at much more aggressive monetization rather than the way we do. The quicker you can get to a position of self-funding, obviously, the better it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice. Graham, would you like to step up and tell us a bit more about Huzu Tech?
Afternoon, guys. My name is Graham Harvey. I am CEO of Huzu Tech, and this afternoon I just want to talk a little bit about the virtual world space, social gaming space, and where Huzu Tech fits in terms of enabling producers, publishers, and game developers rapidly entering the market space, lowering the barrier to entry, and so on. So I'll also talk about some case studies as well with the Horrible Histories brand, the Scholastic IP. And I'll tell you how that's evolved into a virtual world project. And then we'll give you an overview of the virtual world market, associated stats around that, and discuss some revenues and so on. So why build a virtual world in the first place? Well, as we've said, audiences are going online, they're going mobile. They want to have interactivity on the move. They want to have interactivity on their desktop, and so on. Your audience wants more than a flat website and a single-player game. They want to have social ability online. They want to engage with one another. They want to create. They want to nurture, and so on. They also expect to be engaged in more than one platform. So whether, again, it's a web browser, an iPhone, an iPad, and so on. And we know this audience is spending millions of dollars, millions of pounds, billions even, on virtual goods and digital experiences. By 2013, within the virtual world and social gaming space, it's expected to generate $9 billion in revenue alone through subscriptions, virtual goods, better marketing, payment cards, prepaid mobile devices, and so on, are giving the younger audience access to these social games and virtual worlds and paying for virtual goods to enhance their avatars, enhance their private personal space, and basically express oneself. And effectively, our businesses need to produce new and deep new income streams and audiences. And the way to do that is through the digital online environments, through virtual worlds and social games. So a quick introduction to virtual worlds. Moshi Monsters we all know about these guys. They've been up and running for the last few years. And we know that it's aimed at the 16 to 12-year-old age group, catering for boys and girls. We know there's 15 million registered users in the UK alone over the last 3 years. And apparently, there's one child every second is adopting a Moshi or Moshling online. And it's around 50% of the whole entire population of the UK children have adopted a Moshi monster. And off the back of that, they've generated £60 million in merchandise sales. So whether that's books, films, and so on. So they've taken an original IP, developed a virtual world online, and then taken that as a transmedia property and generated this new revenue stream and what have you. So Club Penguin, there's 150 million registered users as of last month, taken 6 years to develop. Around 40 million of those users are actually paying subscribers, getting access to enhanced assets for their avatars. They're adopting puffles and kitting out their igloo and so on. And interestingly, Club Penguin has a nice social feel to it, also having the ability to express oneself through the avatar. Averaging around £3.95 per subscription as well, per month. Again, that was an original IP, as we all know. It's now moved into books and other merchandise as well. FindMyMonster.com, I thought that was worth mentioning today. This is a new virtual world that's going online. Well, it's online. It's aimed at boys mostly, between 7 and 12 years old. And it's a bit of a card game scenario where we get to compare and fight our monsters together. And then if we lose, the monster falls apart and you have to reconfigure him with his bits and pieces. Interestingly, these guys have registered 250,000 registered users in the last 6 months. And they're paying, the average time playing on the game is 30 minutes itself. Again, with our monthly subscription of the average £4.95 per month. This is an original IP, and there's talk of film production and so on. So, Horrible Histories, I'm going to give you guys a bit of an overview about Horrible Histories. So Horrible Histories is a project that we've delivered in conjunction with our sister company, Yomigo. These guys have launched this site last month. They had over 15,000 registered users within 1 month, and it's a fun, educational, and social environment. We all know this is an existing IP, and the IP was originally a book series, print publishing titles, that then was produced into a TV series, and then created into a virtual world. And this has created a new revenue stream for Scholastic and generated new audiences where they can be cross-sold and upsold to. Other market trends, other ones that are worth checking out online, Lego Universe, WeWorld, Habbo, and Mini Monos as well. These are very good virtual worlds, great examples of companies that can engage children online through avatars, through achievements, rewards, and a sound narrative to ensure that the game feels good, looks good, and actually does something, and actually keeps the children coming back time and time again. And overall, actually, with Club Penguin, for example, also providing a child-safe environment, enabling parents to vet, if you like, the site before signing up, and also allowing for reporting of abuse, moderation, and so on. So this is the success things I mentioned beforehand. Questing's important for engagement and immersiveness. Rewards, rewarding users for doing things within the virtual world, so i.e. buddying one another, playing games, and so on. Engagement's key. Gamification's key, so a game within a game. And I'll tell you a little bit about the Horrible Histories game that's very popular for maybe silly reasons, as we think, as adults, but for kids, it's very engaging. Quizzes and narrative. So what's a quest? Well, a quest is something that I'm asked to actually carry out as a user. So for example here, I've taken up a quest to find internal body organs throughout the virtual world. So I picked this quest up when I was in the Pyramids land, and now I'm hunting for these bits and pieces across the virtual world. And as I complete the quest or get closer to the end of the quest, then I'm rewarded to do that. Also, just a quick note here, you can see the functionalities such as the character builder, there's a virtual shop, there's a game, personal room space, and so on. This is an example of a quiz. And this is the chop and drop game I mentioned, gamification. Now, the interesting thing is the kids have actually realized that if they get this wrong, the avatar gets his head cut off. So they're not trying to achieve the goal, they're trying to get it wrong. So there's something not right there. Yeah, actually, games as well. Now, there's several games throughout the virtual world. And the children actually identified very quickly which game actually pays out the most groats or virtual currency for completing the game or getting the highest score. And they found that out within the first 2 days of going live. It's impressive. And this is how the kids communicate as well. They communicate through emoticons, as we see here, and also chat. This version of chat here is called Canned Chat, which is driven through a drop-down menu system to avoid the free text chat scenario and moderation nightmare. So just moving quickly, issues to consider when considering building a virtual world. Consider the best IP. Can I license that IP and develop it, or do I have to create it from scratch? Or if I'm producing IP, where is the virtual world in that? Is there a digital media story linked to this IP? Consider the author or the producer. Consider the game narrative and the appeal to the audience. And also the upfront investment, who's actually going to pay for this thing, i.e. who's going to pay for it upfront, and then once it's up and running, who's going to pay for it in terms of creating new features, functionalities, content, and so on. And also consider devices. Is it best for the iPad? Is it best for the web browser? And so on. Ongoing costs I mentioned beforehand. Think about your community moderation strategy, your customer support strategy, and your marketing strategy. How are you going to get these kids to the site, and how are you going to keep them there? And is that an online strategy? Is that through the TV, and so on? And I suppose how much is that going to cost? So what would the next steps be in our recommendation? Hold a workshop with the publisher, producer, broadcaster. Also consider the game expert to ensure that there's a solid game narrative underneath, and your technologist as well. Is this a Flash-based game? Is this a Unity-based game? HTML5, as we heard beforehand. Is it Flash 11? All these things need to be considered. Draw up a business plan and some concepts. And just quickly, to give you guys a sense of what these things actually cost in virtual worlds, what our scenario really is create a prototype, test it on the marketplace, then create an advanced prototype, and then move on to full beta and into a full virtual world, taking from 10 weeks to 52 weeks to actually deliver. So that's it, guys. So, yep, thank you very much, and my details are there if you want to ask some questions later. Cheers.
Thanks, Graham, and thanks for being very honest and open there about the figures and timescales. I think that's extremely useful to an audience, and often that stuff's tucked away.
First, I don't know if I'm going to use that one or not. I feel like like the representative of the broadcasters, of the old broadcasters, old dinosaurs, wondering if they are going to know how to use an iPad or even how to use that simple remote. So I've done a few slides, not to be naked in front of you, because I know at a panel at MIPCOM Junior, it's very important to have a few slides. So it's just 2 slides. For us broadcaster, that whole revolution is very important, of course. And at France Télévisions, which is a French public broadcaster, we have changed a lot of things to face that revolution. And in the last year, we have created a first department to handle digital and strategy. It's headed by Bruno Patino, who is doing a lot to make the whole France Télévisions group move in that ATAWAD situation. So we are making a lot with Bruno Patino, but also with Yann Chaplon, who is heading France Télévisions Distribution, because yes, we think it's a good way to monetize and to make our brand successful. And in terms of kids and children, the whole team is working a lot with my deputy, Céline Morato, who is just here, to make sure kids get the content everywhere. So the ATAWAD thing, is that the correct way in English? ATAWAD, anytime, anywhere, any device? Does that still work? I know one thing. So we have a plan. I will show you a few images of what we are doing in terms of apps, mainly. In the last years, we have also done a lot in terms of MMORPG, games and TV shows. It's a show called Wokfu, which is shown every Saturday morning on France 3, and which is very successful both on air. Every Saturday morning we have nearly 900,000 people watching, and it's also very successful online with a whole system to play with the same episodes that you've seen every Saturday morning online during the weekend. So that was the first experience back 2 or 3 years ago, I think, and now we are moving faster in the app business with our friends of the commercial division. And next year, we will, this end of the year, we are launching 3 new apps. One with a property you know called Louis, Didou in French, in partnership with Millimage. The other with Nodi, Oui Oui in French, with our partner Corion. Nodi and Louis being a very successful brand on France 5 in Les Zouzous, our branded preschool block. And the third one is an hybrid musical show, mixing live action and animation. And we will have an app for that show to learn music and to play with that show. I've brought you a few images in French, because I think it's good to be interactive and to try to have you understand more my language. So my friend Julien is going to roll that little trailer, that little reportage, it's more a reportage than a trailer, on Louis, Didou.
Cette semaine, on range les consoles puisque je vais vous parler de Didou, une application éducative sur tablette qui apprend aux plus petits les bases du dessin.
L'application Didou, c'est un univers très particulier, des couleurs chatoyantes, un trait très simple, une accessibilité pour l'enfant. C'est pas uniquement autour du dessin, c'est vraiment Didou, apprends-moi à dessiner et apprends-moi les lettres.
Cette application est vraiment adaptée aux plus jeunes puisqu'elle leur fait découvrir les mots en 4 étapes colorées et amusantes.
Il a le choix d'apprendre à dessiner. Ensuite, il va avoir la possibilité de colorier son dessin, découvrir les lettres. Et la dernière activité, c'est vraiment l'écriture. Donc, l'enfant doit tracer les lettres avec son doigt.
La tablette facilite beaucoup l'utilisation puisque la prise en main est très simple.
La tablette, elle est extrêmement intuitive, ce qui permet à l'enfant d'être complètement autonome, d'apprendre et de s'amuser tout seul.
So we've launched it in September or October, I think, and it's already, even this summer, I think. I can read in Céline. It's already a big success. And of course, it's very consistent with the show on air. And we are promoting and cross-promoting that app on France 5. So Zoo 3, you will have to pay to entertain yourself with Zoo 3 apps, while that one will be free. Zouzou is our preschool brand every morning on France 5 for more than 10 years, I think. So that will be free and offer you catch-up, game, parents' advice, and that will be the first free app on a preschool brand in France, I think. So we are just in the middle of developing it with our friends at the digital department at France Télévisions. We are very positive about all that because first we think the kids business, the kids industry knows how to partner with many companies all around the world. On any project in animation, you are used to work with many different people. So we think in that new universe, the kids industry has everything to make a big success. And the thing that we are really motivated about is it really allows broadcasters to have more and more feedback from kids, from their viewers, at any time in the development of a production or of a game. And when you do an animated series, it's a very long way, and usually you are really frustrated because you don't have feedback until years and years. So it's good to have that direct feedback thanks to new technology. And the last thing that we are happy about is we do believe public broadcasters have something to say in that new universe because they will have to teach and to help to educate parents and kids to that new media universe. And pubcasters are really well designed to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Julien. That was very interesting. Could I just ask you, perhaps like some people in the audience, I don't know anything about France Télévisions, so I know you're quite modest, but could you tell us something about your reach and your audiences and your traditional co-pro partners?
I can tell you, but I would need... No, it's working. Okay. So the question was about the reach?
Yeah, how many channels do you have in France? What's your
France
reach?
Télévisions is the French pubcaster. We have 5 channels showing cartoons every morning and afternoon, and we reach between 100,000 and 1 million people. Our bigger rating can be over 1 million people.
Okay. And how do people see your output if they're outside of France? Just go to the website? They can't.
They can because all our content are geolocalized. We do have in France a channel that you can find everywhere, which is called TV5. And we are showing also kids content on TV5, but it's a different organization.
Okay. And your content's available on the App Store that you've showed us?
Yeah, but localized also, I think.
Okay, so 2 threads, I think, for me emerging from that. One, I think, bubbled up from Graham and Maurice, which is about who pays for these professional services that need to be put together. And the second one, while I was watching all of the presentations, and Julien especially, is who actually pays for the kids to get this content, because they don't have methods of paying themselves. So Maurice, I'm going to come to you first and ask the question. You know, you produced a very succinct presentation of a daisy chain of people building up in intensity and strength and audience and a very strong commercial model. But who pays for your services, and how do you initiate that conversation? And then I'm going to come to the other guys and ask the same question.
I think every opportunity has a different structure. I think it's not always an obvious answer to who pays for what and when. In that scenario, different people bought different things. So Miniclip bought an audience. Zodiac bought, Zodiac bought money, and they also bought expertise. Egmont obviously bought reach. So different people are bringing different things. So the money in that scenario came from our relationship with Zodiac. You know, we also part-funded a lot of that ourselves, which is why I spoke about at the beginning. The more you can aggressively monetize from the word go, and the quicker you can get to a kind of cross-neutral situation, the better it is. I mean, typically, obviously, we're an agency where the clients pay our fees, but you know, we've obviously been involved in many scenarios where sometimes it's a broadcaster who pays for these types of things. Sometimes it's the IP owner. Sometimes it's the production house. So it's kind of, it varies depending on the scenario.
When you, as a business, when you're trying to make, as many people in this audience are, I guess, the critical decision of, we are going to do something, we don't quite know what it is. How do you build a matrix of what you're going to do, and and where's the money going to come from internally, and what kind of do you have a process?
We have a process which is based a little bit on gut instinct, a little bit on the partners at the table. So, you know, we kind of had we knew that because we partnered already with Miniclip that we had a pretty good bet on this one. So it was quite easy, but there again, you know, we made similar investment decisions without a distribution partner in place. Regretted it, but right. So yeah.
So you said during the presentation that it's a bit of a lottery, and I think you've repeated there that when you're trying to build your own IP, to give it the best chance that you can, it's got to be a great game, or it's got to be great on the platform it's going to live on, and it's got to be a great IP, which obviously, you know, you've got the double whammy right there. But Graham, you asked this question of me actually before the session, so I'm going to push it back at you because you doorstepped me with it earlier. Who pays? You know, you very helpfully shared some of your prices and your structures, and hopefully, you know, people can find that online or speak to you after this session. But you have a direct engineering cost. So first of all, who pays for that? How do you talk about the different bands of it, and why should they pay you? Why not build it themselves, basically?
Well, in our experience so far, with the Horrible Histories project, for example, the customer, the publisher, actually paid for that development, and you know, that, you know, in terms of our understanding, that was quite unique so far. You know, typically, you know, to develop one, particularly a virtual world, there's cost in terms of licensing a platform, then the customization of that, and then taking it to market and what have you. So general conversations we've had so far really has been things like, you know, virtual worlds, are they joint ventures? Will it be advertisers that pay for it? Will it be the production company? Will it be the broadcaster? And so on. So we're trying to find our way through this as well, to see where it fits. And, you know, I really think that the sensible thing to do perhaps is to do this at very kind of, you know, it's a kind of micro level in terms of investment first of all, test the market out, see what people like, what they don't like, to see whether there's an actual real commercial model under the, you know, under the virtual world or social network and so on.
And where are those commercial models strongest? Who's loyal? Who pays? Who continues to pay? Any geographical data? Obviously, just, you know,
sure,
you're
yeah.
a human Excel spreadsheet, so just.
Yeah. I think interestingly, in the kids' virtual world space, kids generally move from property to property. So they have their subscription, the monthly subscription. So they'll go from Club Penguin over to Moshi, over to something else, and they'll move around a lot, spending money in subscriptions and virtual goods and so on. That seems to be the trend so far from what we've seen. But typically, you know, I think Club Penguin is a great example of how to keep users engaged by creating new features, new functionalities, new mysteries in the virtual world that the community have to actually discover. So really keeping the kids engaged within the game, and therefore driving that underlying revenue stream.
I think maybe that's something that resonates with people in the audience here, because they're used to maybe thinking of an idea for a series, an extensible IP. So that narrative thread doesn't always need to be new content. New mysteries, I think, is an excellent way of putting it, because obviously you can't always invest in new digital features. Now, Julien, again, I don't know much about your business, but it seems like you've taken a very sensible sort of crawl, walk, run approach. You're very, very positive about the end results and how it's going to fly for you guys, but perhaps people in the audience, how do you decide to start? And just starting, let's just start, is all very positive and heroic, but
it has to be a very strong idea, both online and on air. So that's the first step. Then on a commercial side, we are testing models. So we have no answers for now. What we feel is parents will be ready to pay for quality content and for a securized environment, because the more the choice is open, the more you need to feel very confident in the content you give access to your kids or even preschoolers. So we think the fact that we propose securized environments will be very positive. As public broadcasters, we will have to have free content, but we also think commercially it will be positive for us. And a last thing which I believe is very important is that in France we have a strong animation industry because we have a whole system to support that industry, going from the investment that channels have to put in the animation industry to the CNC system. And I believe, and I think the CNC is starting to do that, we also need to support creativity on those new platforms, because otherwise kids won't have any choice but the big platforms built by our colleagues in the States. So it's all about cultural diversity, and Europe has to organize itself to face that.
What is the CNC system? Sorry.
CNC system allows the producer to finance and is a way to finance better the animation and the live action and all the production done in France. So it's
state-sponsored?
It has to be done in France, and then it would require a whole panel to explain that to the whole room.
So does everything need to be done in France? Is similar
a big part of it, but we also do a lot of co-productions with Canada, France, and that it can work in that system too. And we are starting to build things with Canada in terms of new media too.
And are you looking for co-production partners here?
Always.
Here we go.
And the team is here for co-production partners.
So maybe you can hang around afterwards. I'm sure people in the audience are interested in talking to you and your partners. So that kind of covers off very briefly some of the geography of who pays, how it could be set up, and what some of the hard costs are, and how you could potentially partner. In terms of who pays for the actual content, I think maybe some teens have their own bank cards or credit cards or online accounts, but whose parents are paying the bills? Is that right? And how much are they paying?
Yeah, a lot of the time. I mean, we do a lot of focus groups. We actually did one a couple of days ago with some 13-year-old, 14-year-old boys, and you kind of forget they're totally cash-driven. You know, the two of them or three of them have they all had bank accounts, but they were set up when they were born, and their parents put 200 quid in it, and they don't really know what's going on with it. The totally cash society, they have, you know, the only kind of almost non-cash is when they go and buy an iTunes card from the store. So, you know, it takes quite a long time to kind of start thinking about getting credit card details out of teenagers. You need to be thinking 16 plus really until it's a viable solution. So realistically, you are looking at the parents, and then you get into a very interesting thing around, you know, do they want to have the security of knowing that there's an ongoing monthly subscription cost, or do they want to have the flexibility that comes with virtual goods, but then you have a higher likelihood of being pestered more for virtual goods. So then, you know, do you set up an account which your child can then access to buy virtual goods from, and you kind of enter a really interesting, and I think particularly the way the economy is at the moment, parents are particularly reticent about just jumping into I'm going to give Club Penguin my credit card details and hopefully my child will not go crazy on it. So it's a very, very interesting time. I remember this time 3 or 4 years ago, all the talk was how, out of Korea we were seeing that it was all about virtual goods and virtual currency, and how that we would expect over the next, this was 2 or 3 years ago, that we would expect the subscription model to be dead and it to be exclusively around virtual currency. But Club Penguin, Moshi Monsters, they've kind of very much proved that wrong, and they've gone down. Both those have looked at additional monetization above and beyond the subscription model through retail. So Moshi's obviously got a huge suite of I think £60 million in merchandising sales. So that's obviously where they're looking to make their money from, rather than from micropayments on virtual goods.
And Graham, you showed your own subscription. How do you think the parents react to? Have I gone? Oh. Disappeared. Oh, I'm back. So how do you think the parents react to subscription plus? Because we talked about freemium, micropayments, subscription. What about the mixed model? I mean, I don't know enough about this specific area, but a low subscription with a top-up or a virtual wallet? How do?
Well, the Horrible Histories scenario allows for the parents to pay the £4.95 a month. And that gives them access to a certain bank of virtual currency, what's called groats. And that allows for the children to spend X amount per month, capped. I think a lot of it is a little bit of suck it and see as well, to see, is my child going to play this again? Do they want more? And all the rest of it.
How do people in the audience, I want to set this up, how do they suck it and see without, as Maurice said, trusting their kids? Because kids are lovely and wonderful and all that, but you give them a £50 note, they come back with $49.99 worth of sweets.
Yeah. So. Well, I think the idea is that there's like a bank of subscription you can buy. So it can be a month or it can be 6 months or so on. And I think from the feedback we've had is that the figures are definitely in the sort of low percentages in terms of conversion to that, which is quite interesting in itself. And I think that goes across the board, because I think the guys at Mind Candy said that as well for the subscription model. So yeah, over and above that, I think that if you feel that your child wants to be part of the virtual world and wants to continue doing that, then you may open up more funds later on, perhaps. But time will tell. But at the moment, it's a small percentage, I'd say.
Okay. Julien, your projects look like they're on iPhone, iPad. Do you think the parents have a certain halo effect, along with the, obviously, Steve Jobs' miracle device? Do you think the parents trust Apple?
Yes, but they will not be only iPhone and iPad. They will be on any device, because as a
web,
multi-platform, and Android, and as a public service, we need to be everywhere. So.
And where do you expect to make the most money then? Again, I'm thinking of the audience who have got to decide.
I guess it will be a combination of all that, but nobody can really say.
Do you think on your products that kids will have access to the passwords to buy content through the parents' account? Have you done any focus groups or any kind of?
I can tell you that my kid has access to and buy things. I receive all the iPad things, the Apple things every day. So I think.
Do you model based on that trend? Do you expect that to happen with your games?
I can't really tell you on the model thing. It's really more the commercial division who is managing it, and so they are working on that. And we know that we are experiencing. If we fail, we will do something different. But we think it's something that will help our content to have more and more success.
So I think that goes back to what Maurice was saying originally, that you've got to have a great game and great IP. If you just design towards a certain commercial model, you might hit a spike, but then it's going to fall away quite rapidly. Okay, I'm not checking my tweets. I've got all my notes on my phone, which is rather stupid, isn't it? I should have gone for pen and paper. That's the wrong password. Okay. So as a final note, I think just like to thank the panelists, and I'll invite questions from the audience, but I just want to ask them in terms, just very quickly, one sentence. I know it's impossible, but if we try and keep it short. People in the audience, they have got a company that creates IP, might be anywhere in the world, they're very good at what they do. how do they start to move out of their comfort zone, which they know they have to do, into this multi-platform, sort of multi-territory world?
You start with me, aren't you?
I'll start with you, as always.
I think the thing that worked for us was distribution.
Thank you. No.
To be honest, that's probably it. Distribution. Make sure you get your distribution sorted first.
Okay.
First and foremost, because you know, we trialed and failed. You know, I think that we had IPs that were probably potentially stronger than Zoics, but because we didn't have a distribution channel and a distribution strategy in place, ultimately we kind of left it up to the gods of the internet to decide whether or not it would be a popular IP, and you know, it didn't work for those guys. So I would definitely say get your distribution model sorted.
It's very wise words. Julian?
Make sure your content does resonate with what kids are expecting. And I would love to be pitched content with already qualitative research, already verbatim from kids. Because in that new world, it's so long, so expensive. Yeah. I think it really requires more and more research from scratch.
Thank you very much. Graham?
I think if you think you have an IP that can be moved into the digital space, social game, virtual world, and so on, you should definitely market test it through concepts, flat concepts, and so on. Test it on the audience group, and then move that straight forward to a prototype version. And then, if that sticks, then try a full virtual world or social game.
Thank you very much to all of you. Got time for one question, I think. Unless we're allowed to run over. Anyone from MIP give me a signal? No? Thank you very much. Just about to see. Stuart in the second row. And you can ask a question of anyone. Don't feel you have to address it through me as a sort of medium.
There you go. When you get to the app world and distribution, where it's kind of just chuck it in there and see what happens, how are you promoting your apps, and how do you work with, probably not Apple, but how do you kind of ensure that your app finds its audience of kids or their parents, whoever's on the App Store?
That's interesting. I'll have a first go at that very quickly. We just launched 20 football apps. The way we found the audience interesting goes back to Morris' point. We went for distribution first, so we were working with the sports portal, very, very dry, millions of users. We said, can we make a fun app for you? They said, yes, and I said, give us some banner ads, editorial space, let's work on your PR machine. So it goes back to distribution, but I think that's a good point from the audience, that if you're going to put stuff up in the App Store, it's the same as putting things live on the internet, right? Nobody knows it's there. How are you going to get visibility?
Yeah, I can have a go. We work with, we did an iPhone game for Fantastic Mr. Fox, the movie, and in the same way that we worked with Miniclip to make sure that the game that we were creating fitted in with their portfolio and what they were particularly trying to push as a game mechanic, we did the same thing with Apple, where we sat down with Apple and we said, what kind of content are you looking for? What kind of games do you think work well? How can we fit in with your portfolio approach? And that therefore gives us a higher likelihood that, obviously you can't, guarantee editorial support, but it gave us a higher likelihood of it being a featured app within the that kind of golden position of being a featured app within the Apple world. So work with the partner who's distributing it to make sure that they're behind it. They did.
I just asked because, just like many people in the audience, I'm probably interested. How do you sit down with Apple?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're very fortunate. We've done a lot of work with Apple over the, kind of.
First you sit down with Morris.
Yeah, I worked with very closely the guy who, in kind of various guises, so I kind of knew the guy.
How would you advise people in the audience to dig Apple out and to speak to them? Where's the best place to speak to them? Is it on Twitter? Is it their local office? Is there? To
be honest, I probably gave some bad advice there, because Apple are notoriously a nightmare to try and get hold of and talk to. We were obviously very fortunate that we could do that, but where you can, where Apple isn't the partner, then talk to the people who are distributing it and make sure that that you're fitting in with the approach that they're trying to do, because strategically they will be trying to push a certain type of app at a certain time. So if you can fit in with their model, much more likelihood that they're going to feature you and push you.
In terms of promotion, I would say this is where the old dinosaur is powerful. We have advertising capacity. So online,
you have reach.
We have reach, so it can really help a property to be successful on any device because we've got the capacity to advertise, promote online and on air.
And Graham, I guess within the virtual worlds that you build, you can push external apps.
Yes.
So how do you fit those in without them appearing to be kind of, you know, you've got medieval virtual world, an advert starts floating in front of you because games-based advertising is notoriously despised by users. How do you integrate into your virtual worlds without just seeming like you're, you know, draining the audience of cash?
Well, particularly for kids' virtual worlds, commercial advertising is a bit of a no-no. Anyway, so if you read anything about Club Penguin and so on, commercial advertising doesn't work. So I think other methods perhaps, but particularly from the App Store and so on, having some type of synced experience that works with a virtual world that you can have on your iPad and so on would probably help. Yeah.
So more of an app that's maybe free but contains messaging and
to take part in the game, to subscribe, to buy virtual goods and so on, possibly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. I think I'm getting a signal from the back to stop talking. So from that note, I'd just like to thank our panel today, and if you could join me in giving them a big round of applause, and thank you very much.